At the beginning of the season, Bungie went through and they changed a bunch of our exotics or a bunch of our classes, so now that we're done going over all the new stuff, it is time we take a look at this older stuff that got a fresh coat of paint, and we're going to start with Hunters with an exotic that I'm very excited for. The thumbnail and the title give it away, so today we're going to look at Lucky Raspberry, which got some pretty significant changes. Some people have called it a nerf. I think it balances out and makes it a lot more consistent. But before that, of course, like, comment, and subscribe, as we are so close to our goal. We are finally into the double digits, and that is amazing to see. So like, comment, and subscribe. It helps me out a ton. It goes a long way. And let's have a quick word from our sponsor. Mentioned just a few seconds ago, today we're going to be looking at the exotic Lucky Raspberry, which comes with the exotic trait Probability Matrix. Increases the chaining capabilities of arc bolt grenades, damaging enemies with Jolt lightning strikes, and collecting ionic traces. Both grant additional arc bolt grenade energy. Arc bolt grenades can stun overload champions and delay their health or generation. Back in the day, this used to give us grenade energy when we hit targets with the chain of our arc bolt grenades, which to me was very random, as sometimes you would get it all back for hitting a thrall, and then sometimes you would just get none of it back for hitting multiple enemies. It was very inconsistent. With the change, having it work off of Jolt, this makes us very consistent when it comes to giving our energy back. In addition to Jolt giving us energy back, ionic traces also give us a very good chunk of energy. With these two things paired together, we can have a ton of arc bolts to throw around. Also, these arc bolts are going to chain an extra time, so we can hit more targets. As for the overload side of things, for some reason it doesn't stun them unless you're still using the fragment spark of shock in order to jolt them. I tested this for about 6 hours inside of a lost sector, and I never got an overload champion to stun normally with just the grenade hitting them like the exotic says. I'm sure this is a bug or just something going on with the exotic, but our arc bolt grenades do not stun champions by themselves right now, so that's going to play a huge part into our fragments moving forward. For weapons, we're going to want to take stuff that applies Jolt very easily, and there really aren't very many exotic options that do this. There's things like Delicate Tomb and Queensbreaker, but because of this, I mostly stuck with legendary weapons that have Volt Shot. For this, we have many options, but my favorites include Posterity from Deepstone Crypt, Icolos and Path of Least Resistance from Season of the Seraph, Brigand's Law from Season of Plunder, and Oversoul Edict from Crota's End that came back this season. These are all fantastic weapons to use, as they're very easy to apply Jolt with because they are primary weapons. So you get that first defeat, you reload, and then you can fire off a jolting bullet that will then jolt all the targets, giving you energy back to your arc bolt grenades from triggering that jolting lightning strike. Plus, Volt Shot again gives us the ability to stun overload champions intrinsically because it applies a jolt effect. Now again, there are a ton of weapons that have jolt on them, so use whatever you want to use, whether that be one of the exotics that have jolt or one of these weapons or whatever weapon you want to use. As long as it has Volt Shot, it is going to pair very nicely with this build, and it's going to work very well just overall because again, jolting is very good at clearing ads. When it comes to our class setup, we're going to start with Flow State. Defeating a jolted target makes you amplified. While you are amplified, your dodge recharges more quickly and you are more resilient while dodging, and your reload speed is greatly increased. The whole point of this build is to jolt as many targets as we can all the time, so we can get the energy to our arc bolt grenades. So in that process, we're going to become amplified very easily, so we can get the benefits from that, as well as the additional ones from Flow State itself, and of course, being able to take advantage of Speed Booster. We're also going to take Tempest Strike. While sliding, activate your charged melee to unleash a devastating uppercut attack that travels along the ground in front of you, damaging and jolting targets it hits. For the second aspect, you can honestly take either of the options we have available to us, but I like Tempest Strike as it is fun and you can jolt multiple targets very easily when they get hit with that uppercut attack, and it does some pretty good damage, so keep that in mind. But of course, if you want to use the exploding lightning strike from the other aspect, that is also very good as well. For our fragments, we're going to start with Spark of Shock. Your arc grenades jolt targets with a -10 to our discipline. Like I mentioned in the beginning of this video, for some reason we can't stun overload champions with just our grenade as the perk says, so now we have to use Spark of Shock to apply Jolt in order to do that, which comes with its own benefits. Again, we can play into Flow State, and we can take things like Spark of Ions. Defeating a jolted target creates an ionic trace. Our arc bolts will now jolt from Spark of Shock, meaning that we can make those ionic traces from the targets we hit from our grenades. This also means with just these 2 fragments, we can double dip into our arc bolt grenade regen from jolting the targets from Spark of Shock, and then picking up the ionic traces that we're going to make from Spark of Ions. This is going to give us a ton of grenade energy and is going to allow us to repeat this cycle very easily. We're also going to pick up more ionic traces from Spark of Discharge. Arc weapon final blows have a chance to create an ionic trace with a -10 to our strength. Again, we want to make a ton of ionic traces, so now our weapons are going to make them at random, as we're going to want to pair this with a ton of arc weapons, whether that be your primary, like a gun with osmosis, or your energy weapons, the ones we went over, or even a heavy weapon. We're going to be using a ton of arc weapons for this build, so we're going to want them to do that extra oomph and have the chance to make us ionic traces to then feed back into our grenade once more. Finally, we have Spark of Resistance. While surrounded by combatants, you are more resistant to incoming damage with a +10 to strength. Any damage resistance is good with any build, and with our arc subclasses we have a bunch of different options, so use the one that you like the most. I just prefer this one because it is very easy, just get surrounded by combatants, and Grandmaster content that's probably not the healthiest thing to do, but again, there are a ton of options for our arc subclasses that give us damage resistance. For our artifact, the important stuff to take is going to be Elemental Orbs Arc, as these can apply Jolt to targets, and that plays very well into our entire build, from our class setup to our exotic. Elemental Fury, so our elemental orbs and abilities can do more damage to stun champions, which is very nice for our arc bolt grenades. Communal pickups. When an ally picks up our elemental orb, we will get a damage boost to our arc weapons. Refreshing pickups, so when we pick up an elemental orb, we will get energy back to our least charged ability. Monochromatic Maestro, so we can get bonus damage to our abilities and weapons by cycling them. And finally, Elemental Embrace, so when we are amplified or have speed booster, we will get bonus damage resistance from arc damage, and we will have increased recovery. For our armor mod, starting with our helmet, we're going to take 2 ashes to assets, as we're going to be throwing a ton of grenades. We can get our super back really quick, and Harmonic Siphon as we're running arc weapons, and we can make orbs easily from that. Arms, we have firepower to make orbs from our grenades, and grenade kickstart, so when we throw a grenade we can consume stacks of armor charge and get grenade energy back. Chest, we have charged up to get more stacks of armor charge, and then either resistance mods or reserve mods depending on what you want to use. Legs, we have stacks on stacks, so you can get 2 stacks of armor charge for 1 orb. You can also use elemental charge here, as that is also a very good option. Innervation, so we can get grenade energy back when we pick up orbs, as well as recuperation, so we can get health back at the same time. For our cloak, we have Reaper to make more orbs when we defeat a target after dodging. Powerful Attractor, so when we do dodge, we collect nearby orbs. And Bomber to just top off that little bit of grenade energy when we need it. For stats, we're definitely going to want to prioritize Discipline, so we can use our arc bolt grenades as often as possible in combination with everything else we have. And of course, Resilience is very nice due to damage reduction. Again, damage resistance, damage reduction is also just king when it comes to high-end content, so it is always nice to have and use. As for this build as a whole, I'm actually very impressed with how Lucky Raspberry actually holds up in high-end content now. Like I mentioned earlier, it was very inconsistent last season. Even when I was recording footage for my exotics that you're going to want this season, it was a very inconsistent exotic. It would tag 1 thrall, get it all back, tag a bunch of enemies, and get like half of it back. So this is a very good change. This is actually one of the better changes we've had for our exotics in a while. It gave us something that actually played into the exotics perk itself, and it didn't give it just a tier 4 damage boost, which is what they're doing to a lot of older exotics to just make them feel more relevant. Another thing too is the addition of Jolt giving us grenade energy means we don't have to run a demolitionist weapon. We can now really double down on that class synergy with that traits and these perks, which is really nice. I did run a demolitionist weapon in my first slot. I used a fusion rifle, but I really didn't use it to get grenade energy back. It was just there to deal with heavy health target. But with that being said, this build is actually a really fun one to use, and is actually a very good one to use. So if you want to check it out, I'll leave the dim link down in the description somewhere. If not, someone yell at me in the comments and I will fix it immediately. But with that being said, that is the end of our video. So please like, comment, and subscribe, as we are so close and it helps me out a ton. And I will see you guys in the next video.